The scent of burnt coffee and desperation hung in the air of Rosie's diner, a forgotten slice of Americana, tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat on the east side of town. Sarah Mitchell's feet ached, in her worn sneakers, as she wiped down the cracked vinyl booth for what felt like the 1,000th time that day. At 28, she'd learned that dreams don't pay medical bills, and pride doesn't keep the lights on. Her daughter Emma needed her, and that was enough reason to smile through another double shift, even when her own stomach growled louder than the vintage jukebox in the corner. She never imagined that one ordinary Tuesday would crack her world wide open. The lunch rush had died down to its usual trickle of regulars when the bell above the door chimed. Sarah glanced up from refilling salt shakers to see an elderly man shuffling through the entrance, his movements uncertain and halting. He wore an expensive cashmere coat that seemed oddly out of place in their humble establishment, but it was the confusion in his roomy eyes that made Sarah's heart constrict. She'd seen that look before, in her own grandmother's face during those final years when memories became ghosts and the present dissolved like sugar in hot tea. The old man stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, one hand gripping the frame as if anchoring himself to reality. No one else seemed to notice him. The other waitress, Linda, was too busy gossiping with the cook through the kitchen window. The handful of customers remained absorbed in their phones and newspapers, sealed in their own private bubbles. "Sir, would you like a seat?" Sarah approached him gently, the way you might approach a startled bird. He turned to her, and for a moment, his pale blue eyes cleared. I'm not sure where I am. I was looking for... The sentence trailed off into silence, the thought evaporating before it could fully form. Sarah's instincts kicked in. She'd spent enough time at her grandmother's nursing home to recognize the signs. This man wasn't just lost in the geographic sense. He was adrift in time itself, caught in the fog of dementia or Alzheimer's, wandering without a tether. "That's okay," she said softly, taking his elbow. "Why don't you sit down and we'll figure it out together?" She guided him to a corner booth, the one with the least cracked upholstery, and helped him out of his coat. The label inside read Brunello Cucinelli. Sarah didn't know designer brands well, but she knew that coat cost more than she made in 6 months. There was no wallet in the pockets, no phone, no identification. Just a monogrammed handkerchief with the initials R.H. "Are you hungry, mister?" She tried. "Hungry," he repeated, grasping onto the word like a life raft. Yes, I think so." Sarah knew she should probably call the police, report a missing person, but something held her back. Maybe it was the dignity in the way he tried to straighten his collar, or the fear that flickered across his face when she mentioned authorities. Her shift was ending soon, but what were 15 minutes against this man's confusion and hunger? She brought him the turkey plate special with mashed potatoes, the kind of comfort food that transcends memory. As she set it down, she noticed his hands trembling too badly to hold the fork properly. Without thinking, without asking, Sarah slid into the booth across from him and cut his turkey into manageable pieces. "Here," she said. "Let me help." She guided the fork to his mouth with the same patience she used with Emma when her daughter was learning to feed herself. The old man chewed slowly, and with each bite, something in his posture relaxed. Sarah told him about the weather, about the cherry pie they'd just baked that morning, about nothing and everything, filling the silence with the kind of gentle chatter that asked nothing of him but presence. She didn't notice the man in the charcoal suit watching from the doorway. She didn't see him pull out his phone and make a call, or the way his shoulders sagged with relief so profound it was almost a collapse. Marcus Hayes had been searching for his father for 3 hours. 3 hours of mounting panic, of imagining worst-case scenarios, of blaming himself for not hiring a full-time caregiver sooner. 3 hours since his father had wandered, away from the hospital where they'd been, waiting for test results, since security footage showed Robert Hayes slipping out a side entrance during a shift change. Marcus had built a tech empire from nothing. He'd negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions, stared down venture capitalists, and revolutionized cloud computing. But none of that mattered when he couldn't find his own father. None of it meant anything when the man who'd taught him to ride a bike and balance a checkbook couldn't remember his own address. The private investigator he'd hired had finally traced his father's movements to this neighborhood and Marcus had been driving these streets methodically, desperately, when he spotted the familiar coat through the diner window. Now he stood frozen in the doorway, watching a waitress in a stained apron feeding his father, with the tenderness of a daughter. She was laughing at something his father had said, even though Marcus knew the words were probably incoherent. She treated him not as a burden or a charity case, but as a person worthy of time and care. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. He'd been so focused on finding solutions, on researching the best facilities, on throwing money at the problem, that he'd forgotten what his father actually needed. Not another expensive specialist or a state-of-the-art memory care unit. Just someone to sit with him, to see him, to treat him like he still mattered. Marcus watched for another minute before approaching the booth. "Dad?" Robert Hayes looked up, and incredibly, recognition flickered. "Marcus? Marcus, there you are. I couldn't find you." "I know, Dad, I know. I'm here now." Marcus slid into the booth beside his father, then looked at Sarah. "Thank you. I don't even know." "Thank you." Sarah stood quickly, suddenly self-conscious. "Oh, I didn't. I mean, He seemed like he needed help." "How much do I owe you? For the meal, for your time, for—" Marcus reached for his wallet. "Nothing," Sarah said firmly. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad he's safe." Marcus studied her more closely, the exhaustion in her eyes, the name tag that read Sarah in fading marker, the way she kept glancing at the clock, probably worried about whatever came next in her day. He thought of the business card in his pocket, the one that opened doors and commanded immediate attention, but he hesitated. "You work here every day?" he asked instead. "Most days. Double shifts when I can get them." She didn't say why, didn't explain about Emma's cerebral palsy or the medical bills that multiplied like rabbits, or the ex-husband who'd decided fatherhood wasn't for him. Some struggles you kept private. Marcus nodded slowly. Over the next 20 minutes, as they waited for his driver to arrive, he learned about Sarah's life in fragments. She was studying for a nursing degree online, class by class whenever she could scrape together tuition. She dreamed of working in pediatrics. Her daughter was 7 and loved butterflies and wanted to be a scientist. When the car arrived, Marcus helped his father to his feet. At the door, he turned back. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you. I want to help you somehow. Not because you expect it, but because the world needs more people like you, and you shouldn't have to struggle this hard to survive while being that kind." Sarah started to protest, but Marcus held up his hand. "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about investment. In people who invest in others." He handed her a business card. "Tomorrow, if you're willing, someone from my company will call you. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to finish your nursing degree. I'd like to set up a trust for your daughter's future. And I'd like to hire you, if you're interested, to help coordinate a new initiative I'm starting, a program that provides support for caregivers and families dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's." Sarah stared at the card. Marcus Hayes. The Marcus Hayes. She'd read about him in the papers, seen his face on magazine covers in the grocery checkout line. The tech billionaire who'd just donated $100 million to medical research. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You showed my father dignity when he couldn't remember his own name. You gave him your time when you could have just called the cops and moved on with your shift. You saw a person, not a problem." Marcus's voice wavered slightly. "That's the kind of insight I need. That's the kind of heart that this program requires. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. But please let me do this." Sarah looked at the elderly man standing beside this billionaire, saw how Marcus held his father's arm with infinite gentleness, and she understood. This wasn't about gratitude or guilt. This was about a son who'd glimpsed a better way, forward through a crack in his own fear. "I'll think about it," she managed to say, though her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the card. After they left, Sarah sat in the booth and cried. Not delicate tears, but great, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and ancient, from the place where hope lives when you've almost given up on it. Linda came over, alarmed, and Sarah showed her the card. "Is this real?" Linda breathed. "I think so," Sarah said. "I think maybe it is." That night, Sarah held Emma close and told her a story about kindness, about how sometimes the smallest gestures ripple out in ways we can't predict. She didn't mention the scholarship or the trust yet. Those were dreams too big to speak aloud until they solidified into reality. But in the morning, when the phone rang and a professional voice confirmed that yes, this was real, that Marcus Hayes kept his promises, Sarah understood something fundamental had shifted, not just in her circumstances, though those would change dramatically, but in her understanding of what was possible when human beings really saw each other. 6 months later, Sarah walked across a stage in a cap and gown, her nursing degree finally complete. Emma was in the front row, waving a sign she'd made herself. And in the back, nearly unnoticed, sat an elderly man in a cashmere coat beside his son, both of them smiling. Sometimes redemption doesn't come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in a rundown diner on a Tuesday afternoon, in the space between one person's need and another person's willingness to meet it. No questions asked, no reward expected. Sometimes the most extraordinary things grow from the most ordinary kindness. And sometimes when you feed someone who's hungry, you're really feeding the world.